All right, let's take a moment here and look at Chapter 6, Engaging Sources from the Craft of Research. Now, the book points out that there are different fields use different kinds of evidence. And so, of course, there are, collecting data. You must know the particular kinds of evidence your readers expect. So, different kinds of fields use different kinds of evidence. So before you start collecting data, you need to know the kind of that your readers expect. So there's of course personal beliefs, anecdotes from a writer's lives, as in a first-year writing course. If you think about that, that's a literacy narrative. Um, for those of you who had 1301 with me, direct quotation from letters, diaries, poems, books, and so on, as in most humanities courses. Verbal accounts of objects, images, and events in the form of descriptions, anecdotes, and narratives, as in history. Fine-grained records of objects, events recorded on photographs, videotapes, as in recordings in anthropology, and then in quantitative data gathered from laboratory experiments such as social and natural sciences. So different types of fields basically have different types of writing or different kind of expectations for the kind of data that's presented to them. One of the things you're going to want to keep in mind, regardless of what you're going to be looking into, because for you guys, you might run some of the whole range of these, is that while you keep records and while you investigate sources, you need to keep a record of while you do. This is just a really good tip for helping you out. Okay? It says you want to, when you find a source, record all of the important bibliographic data. That's all the stuff that would be included in Works Cited. You will need this, of course, for the Works Cited and the in-text citation later. Okay? So the key element here is keep a record. If you want to handwrite it, anything of that, and write it down. However works best for you. Type it up, write it down. All right. Now, of course, they recommend reading important sources twice. Of course, you also want to check any sources for relative liability, like we talked about in Chapter 5. For using secondaries in any case, that's engaging sources actively. When you engage secondary sources to plan your argument, you want to make sure that you can read for data to use as evidence, claims to use as support, models of arguments and analysis, to make sure that you have define your problem, arguments to respond to. Now, when it comes back to that whole idea of taking notes, the book has this example, and this is basically a note card. And so you'll see here that what they've done is they've recorded information in this example. All right, so take a moment to glance at it. Now, sort of to break this down, okay, in the top left is the author, a short title, and a page number. So if I go back here, author, title, page number. All right. At the top right are keywords that the researchers sort and resort notes in different categories. The body of the card summarizes the source, records a direct quotation, and includes a thought about further research. And the bottom left is a call number for the source. This is kind of an old school way of doing things. Of course, the book doesn't note that, to be honest, they don't really see this method anymore. But the value of it, there is still some value. So they basically take this example and they provide you with 3 principles that you should be using when you're taking notes and gathering information for your use in your paper. The first one is on some sort of sheet of paper, okay, whether you type this or write this down, keep a record, okay? Record the author, short title of the source, page numbers, keywords. Would be a good thing to hold on to. All right. Put notes on different topics on different pages. Okay. Perhaps most important, clearly distinguish 3 kinds of notes: what you quote, what you paraphrase, and your own thoughts. Talk about different computers. You can make sure that you do different font styles, or if you're writing this down, different colored ink. So let's take a moment and think about this. So when you take notes on a source, take a moment to record the important bibliographic information, okay? The author, the title, page numbers you're dealing with, where you're finding the quotations. A lot of times this will be about you finding quotations. If it's from different topics, it says here, I would say different sources on different pages. And then, of course, distinguish that, what is it you're going to be quoting? I would use quotation marks. Is there anything you're going to be paraphrasing? You may want to find some way to distinguish that. And then make sure that you're just making sure that you don't end up mixing up what you're quoting, what you're paraphrasing, and your own thoughts. Make sure that there's some sort of distinction. And this, of course, is entirely based on how this works for you. There's no systematic way to do that. Okay? So it goes on here about knowing when to quote, paraphrase, and summarize. And the book offers you these guidelines and suggestions. Okay? And we'll come back to some of this because I say chapter 2 and chapter 3 deal with summarizing, paraphrasing, and quoting. So we'll deal with some of this some more next week and the week after. It says, so when you summarize when you need only the point of a passage, a section, or even a whole article or book. So a main point. Summary is useful for context or views that are related but not specifically relevant. Okay? A summary of a source never serves as good evidence. So this is kind of the outside bit here. You want this as just sort of maybe a lead-in. Paraphrasing. Paraphrase when you can represent what a source says more clearly or pointedly than it does. Paraphrase doesn't mean changing just a word or two. You must replace most of the words and the phrasing of the original with your own. Okay? It's never as good as a direct quotation, but also like a direct quotation, paraphrasing does require an in-text citation to MLA. And then, of course, a direct quotation is typically the best kind of that you can do if you can directly quote something from a source material. Okay, it says here is used to cite specific examples directly, as they are from the text. So it's word for word. Okay, we indicate that with quotation marks. They come from an authority that backs up your claim or sometimes challenges it, and this is the best kind of evidence. All right, so those are the things I want you to really take away from chapter 6 and keep in mind going forward. And we will be talking more about this in class as we go forward.